One of the things that I'm spending a lot of time paying attention to that you've got a great deal of expertise on has to do with what we're seeing as far as this phenomenon of cyber attacks. What do you think is actually going on with these cyber attacks in South Korea?
Well, I think, this week it's definitely one of the hottest news items ever. So what happened is that there appears to be a very significant and coordinated effort to take down several government and private sector websites, both in America and in South Korea. So I've seen a list of targets, actually, yesterday. And it's a few dozen websites. Some of them are the usual suspects, like the State Department or the U.S. Treasury website. Some of them are websites like that of the Washington Post group, for example. There is also Amazon is on that list. And the other half of those websites are South Korean websites. Those include their presidential Blue House, also several ministries, but also some news and media websites. And the attacks seem to come from the same botnet. And those who don't know, I guess I'll just have to clarify to our listeners and the viewers. A botnet is basically a network of computers which have been infected, and they are coordinated by one computer in the network, which sends commands to them, right? So, and they have been directed to attack those websites of the U.S. government and the South Korean government. And even though, many of the experts I've spoken to while working on covering the story for foreign policy and also for The Economist, they actually say that the attacks were not of a very large scale. So it's very surprising that actually the websites of the U.S. government in particular were significantly slowed down, and many of them are actually not available. The bigger problem, I think, is that we still don't know where the attacks are coming from. As a typical botnet, that one had thousands of computers in it, and the attacks seem to be scattered over more than a few dozen countries, and we don't really know who's behind it. And to make it very exciting, a lot of South Korean nationalist politicians actually, and also a lot of their intelligence services, actually try to implicate North Korea in it, saying that the attacks are coming from North Korea, and North Korea has a very advanced cyber warfare capability, and that basically it may just be, expanding its aggressive militaristic behavior into cyberspace. Again, we don't really have any proof as to what happened, but it's very interesting that we're beginning to have this debate, particularly given that the attacks happened on July 1st weekend here in the U.S. So it was a very ominous happening.
Well, so let's unpack a little bit what actually happens in these attacks, right?
Yeah.
We're used to using this term cyber warfare.
Mm-hmm.
What's actually going on, as I understand it, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, is what's called a distributed denial of service attack.
That's right.
And the way that I usually try to explain this to people is the analogy of the pizza parlor. If you play that old childhood prank of calling the pizza parlor and ordering a pizza, and then saying where you want it delivered, and then sort of hanging up, and then calling again, you can eventually just clog the pizza parlor's lines to the point where it can't answer its phones anymore. And to a large extent, what's going on with these distributed denial of service attacks is that a botnet herder, as we call them, is able to control thousands, maybe tens of thousands of computers. And there's a chance that if you're listening to this podcast, yours may actually be one of those computers. It's not all that hard to get infected with a botnet. Basically, you download a program that gives someone a backdoor into your computer. We've seen these sorts of attacks on things like online gambling sites, financial transfer sites. It's a pretty common criminal tactic these days. And usually what happens is someone will attack your site, render it unusable, and then come to you and essentially say, we'd like some money, please, so that we stop this from happening. What's unusual in this case, as I understand it, is that the attacks appear to be at a number of government sites. Now, you mentioned that your understanding is that these attacks are comparatively small, and you said you were sort of surprised by that. I'm not actually all that surprised. I think most people don't have websites that are capable of dealing with tens of thousands of simultaneous connections. Most of us simply don't deal with that sort of level of usage. I've run a lot of websites over the years, and I know that one of the ways that people often respond to a denial of service attack is simply to just reconfigure their web server so that they're capable of dealing with slightly more traffic. And that may be part of what's happening in response to this.